Hello and welcome to the Luxury Living Podcast. On the Luxury Living Podcast, we explore ideas and themes around making your home more convenient, more beautiful, and easier to use. We are here every month or so, sometimes a couple of times a month. So please like if you think this content is useful and share and all that stuff. I know you know how to do on social media to get everybody involved in what we're doing. This week, we have a really important subject, and to talk about that and introduce our guest here is Keith. Hey, Keith, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Nigel.
So why don't you introduce our guest, Keith, and we'll get this going.
Yeah, so today we have two members of the Bravas team. We have Dax Pineda and Jose Saavedra. Did I get that even closer right, Jose?
That's actually good enough. Yes, it is.
I'll take good enough. So Dax and Jose are both on our team, both pretty knowledgeable, both from a technical standpoint and from a sales standpoint. Dax, you just want to start by telling us kind of what you do and how you made your way to this point in your career.
Well, I'm the GM here in Kansas City. I've been in the industry for about 20 years now, from anything from being a tech to a salesperson to design engineering to now management. So I've seen and done just about every aspect of the job so far. So
Awesome. And Jose, same question for you. How did you get here?
Uh, Very similar to Dax. I started in the car audio world very early on and just moved into home and went from pre-wires to finish installation to programming to now I basically do design and management for the Indianapolis location, um, providing sales help as best as I can to get our salesmen all the information and technical information they need.
Well, I guess I'll direct this first question to you, Jose, because of your background in audio, which I think audio and video is kind of what you think of when you think of as an AV company. But we are going to talk today about window coverings, motorized shades. Why does an AV company sell motorized shades? That seems like a little bit of a departure from kind of what you would think of the traditional AV company role.
Yeah, it definitely does. And I think one of the most important things um, that you can have in this automated home that everyone's moving into is the fact that motorized window treatments and window treatments in general need to be smart, and people want them to integrate with everything. And uh, because we're the AV guys, we kind of fall into this world of, hey, I want my technology to all work together, and for it to work together, it kind of all has to play together. And I think that's where we kind of fall in, where, hey, if we're providing the controls and we're providing all of the handheld and the control systems of the home, having that system integrate with us and having us provide that for you, it'll give you the best and seamless experience.
And I guess in our case, most of the shades we sell are the same brand as the lighting control systems that we typically specify. Dax, how do you see that fitting together? And do you think that's important that those are kind of the same, one and the same
oh,
brand?
absolutely. It's the integration between lighting control and shades is hand in hand. You know, it all has to do with lighting and control. So if you've got areas of the day where you're having a ton of light shooting in from one side of the house where you're trying to watch TV, or you're just trying to protect your furniture from getting sun faded, having those automated drapes or rollers or however it is to come down at a certain time of day or while you're trying to watch TV so you don't have glare, that just becomes that much easier that you can do with automated sequence out of the lighting control system.
Yeah, it's interesting. You made a great point there, Dex, which is we tend to think about sometimes shades or draperies or all those things about daylight, keeping it dark. But there's a lot of other reasons, aren't there? You mentioned one of them, the sun breach of the fabrics and of the floors. We see clients spend tens of thousands of dollars on furniture and then just have sun over them. But there's security. There are lots of reasons for this, aren't there?
Absolutely. You know, privacy privacy is one of the biggest ones, and or giving you the experience of the house you're looking for. So if you have a lake house, right, you want that view during the day to be able to see out to the lake and things like that. But at the same time, you don't want the sun just blaring in. So having the correct color, fabric, openness that allows you to see out, but yet knock down some of that direct light in, so it's not heating the house up, not sun fading your furniture, so on and so forth, is very crucial to do when you're picking out fabric.
So I think we've already mentioned a bunch of different reasons you would have these: keeping light in, keeping light out, privacy, protecting your furniture. Is there anybody that these are not for, or is this really a product for every home?
Well, I definitely think it's a product for every home. Um, at some point, someone's going to want to put a window blind, and are they going to go to the guy around the corner that drives around in a van, or are they going to find something that can integrate and work with the system that's already installed in their home?
I live in an apartment block with lots of shades and lots of windows. And one of the things my friends say a lot is, automated shades seem very expensive, much more expensive than manual shades. So, Dax, when you're talking to clients and they say, well, do I really need the expensive automated shades? What do you tell them?
It's a convenience factor for one, but also you can mix and match depending on if you're going with Lutron, you can mix and match manual and automated. So if you've got certain areas, let's say your bedroom or a living room, that you want automated shades, but you want the rest to all look the same, they also give you a chain pulled manual option that you can get in the exact same material. So you can get the same look everywhere. You just don't have the same functionality as you would with the motorized.
The other thing, Jose, is I'm very sensitive to is people put in manual shades because they think it's just going to take 2 or 3 seconds a day to change it. But the fact is, most people who put manual shades in, they never change them, do they?
Yeah, that's definitely correct. I actually I actually specified my first manual shade for a secondary bedroom uh, in the past 10 years that I've been specifying shades. And it was just because it's a secondary bedroom, like Dax was just saying, they wanted it to match. And they wanted it open or closed that 2 times a year that somebody's going to be in that secondary bedroom. Now, I do want to go back to your question to Dax because I think um, in another point when it's like, oh, why are they so expensive? We've kind of covered it, but I definitely think performance is a key factor of it, right? When you're in an apartment block, you have a lot of windows, and you don't want to have those windows closing and you hear a freight train coming through your living room because those lower cost shades are lower cost, so they have less performance. One of the advantages of the Lutron products is that they're super quiet. They're whisper quiet. So when they're all coming down, you don't really notice that there's shades coming down in the room, which goes back to the performance factor, right? That's why they cost more, right? We're not going to provide you something that when you put your shades down, you're going to be kind of embarrassed with your friends, everyone, and it just sounds like a loud train coming through your living room.
Yeah, and I have people in the building who bought much cheaper shades than Lotron. Let me tell you, they regret it, and they replace them. And sometimes better to buy once and cry once.
So we've talked about a few of the things that a motorized shade can do for you, but what are some considerations someone should be thinking about when they're thinking about whether or not they would work in their home? Dax, anything somebody should start, kind of the broad thinking someone should apply when they're starting to think about whether or not shades are a good fit for them?
Well, the design and or the type of shade that works in with the decor of the room and or the purpose that the shade's being put in. So if you want to try like a blackout or something like that for bedrooms, so you're trying to sleep. So picking the right shade and accessories to accomplish the goal behind it. So if you want a full blackout for a bedroom, then adding side channels in, making sure it goes down, the correct hem bars used are all crucial factors in choosing that particular type of lighting or window coverings.
And I also want to add on to that. Most of the integrations that we're dealing with when it comes to fabrics and colors, we're working with an interior designer, right? The interior designer is going to have their opinion, and their opinion matters. We need to make sure we work with the interior designers on what's available, what styles, what options, and let them know that, hey, you guide the bus and we provide the equipment necessary to get you that best experience, that best look in your client's home.
So we've talked about some of the functions that a shade can provide for a client, but what should they consider when they're starting to think about putting shades in their home? Dax, you got anything?
Yeah, there's a lot of different types of shades when you're looking at it between rollers, Romans, wooden slat shades, draperies. It really just depends on the look and the style you're going for that you and your designer are looking to pick out and how you want the ultimate goal of the room to be.
Awesome. So let's start with kind of the most basic one. The roller shade is what most of our installs use. Jose, why do we use roller shades so often, and why does that fit for so many of our clients?
Well, I think the biggest advantage with roller shades is just the fact that when your shade is open, you have a concealed, almost a completely concealed piece of material where everything is out of the way. You don't have anything blocking a view. You don't have anything bunched up on a side. Kind of everything rolls up nice and neatly into a little pocket, into a concealed slot, and it just gives you a full view of the window. And when you do need that shade to be down, you have so many different options of openness factors, which it basically tells you how much light actually goes through the shade, different types of colors and materials themselves. So if you need it to be completely black, to have a for sleeping purposes, or you want no visibility and full privacy, you could have a blackout which lets no light to come through and your window's completely gone. Now, when it's daytime, that's up and you have a completely beautiful view.
Awesome. And you mentioned openness factors. And I'd say most of the fabrics, again, we install kind of are somewhere between 1 and 10% openness. But Dex, how does someone determine what openness factor they would want for their shade, and why is that important?
That is the determination of how much light the shade allows through. So a lot of us have boards that we bring out that we can hold up to the window, and you can see the amount of visibility through the shade, especially if you're doing it during the day. You can look at that, and what you see during the day is also what you're going to see from the outside looking in at night. So depending on what privacy or what you want to see during the day and how much clarity you want will determine what amount of openness factor you want to go with.
Jose, any other thoughts that kind of things you consider when you're trying to help a client determine the right openness?
So to understand the openness, which is very important in understanding the what features you want out of it. So if you want a privacy, that 1% is going to be very important for you. You're not going to be able to see outside. You're not going to be able to see inside during the evening time, but you have to really have the customers understand that at 1%, you're not going to see the kids playing out in the yard. You're not going to see the trees outside, but you are going to get that privacy feature. Now, 3s and 5%, you start to see a little bit more. There's a little bit more clarity, and you still get a little bit of that privacy, which is kind of where I feel most people tend to be when there is a sheer shade being used.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that a lot of houses are going to use multiple opacities in one home. They may have west facing windows. They get really harsh afternoon sun where they do want a 1%. They may have north or south facing windows that just don't get as much direct sunlight. They can get away with a 5 or 10%. And, as long as they choose the same fabric for every window, probably not putting them in the same room together, but it's easy to just combine those and have the same consistent look throughout a whole home without having the exact same fabric in every space. There really just are a lot of things to consider when it comes to picking that fabric. And we work with interior designers to make sure we're getting the right color and the right look for the space, and even sometimes with the architects to make sure we're getting the right amount of light into the space. But a lot does go into it. And then we get to kind of the translucent shades that we probably don't sell as many of, and then blackouts, which you both have alluded to. Dax, tell me the considerations someone should take into account when they're putting a blackout fabric into a room.
Well, primarily, what's the purpose of the room? If it's a bedroom where you're trying to make sure you can sleep, if you work nights and you're trying to sleep during the day, that's one factor where you want 100% privacy. Um, and you want a thermal barrier. So if you've got a lot of direct sun in the summer where it's a hot fabric, you're trying to separate that heat from the room. That's a lot of times when you use a blackout material is you're putting that barrier there to keep the room more cool and comfortable.
Uh, And as you've mentioned before, or I think Jose mentioned it, was you can also add side channels to a blackout to keep light from leaking around the sides of that fabric. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't consider is they assume a blackout shade alone is going to make their room pitch black, but we have to account for that light coming around the sides. And from what I've seen from most of our clients, except in situations like you mentioned, Dax, somebody having to sleep during the day probably does need a full blackout. And it's a big project to do, but it can be done very, very well. For most people, though, that private 1% kind of shade is probably all they need in their bedroom. It's going to cut out a lot of that heat, going to cut out a lot of the glare. At night, it's going to be very dark, but there is still some light going to be coming through. I think we've seen that. And then I guess one more thing we should consider is having dual rollers. Jose, can you kind of explain the point behind dual rollers and just really briefly what goes into trying incorporating a shade that big into a space?
Well, so when you have a dual roller situation, you kind of get the best of both worlds, where you want to have that sheer, have some of that light filtering, have a little bit of that privacy by using a sheer product. So you have that sheer product comes down, but then you also have that nighttime purpose where you need to have that blackout, which layers in front or behind that. And by providing that double roll situation, you can have the best of both worlds. You can have fully dark in channels where no light comes in for nighttime or for daytime sleeping. And then you also have that sheer product where you can still have your privacy and you can still see outside, and the light is being kind of a little bit, the light is being covered just a little bit so that you're not damaging furnishing and have too much glare inside the room.
Yeah, exactly. Well, one of my favorite clients told us that in one of her homes, she only had a blackout roller in her master bedroom, but she'd love to sit by the window in the master to read, but she could only do it for the first couple of hours of the morning. She couldn't sit there in the afternoon because the sun coming through was so hot, and she would have given anything just to have the ability to filter that light a little bit. And I think her solution ended up being planting a tree outside the window. So it was sad that we weren't a part of that project and couldn't help her with that. But um, so we could talk about rollers probably for the next hour nonstop because it is something we deal with a lot. But I want to talk about some of the other types of shades that we can motorize, but we don't do as often. So I would say after roller shades, probably the second most common we do is drapery tracks. Um, where do you see clients using drapery tracks in their homes, and where is that a valuable tool for them?
So we actually have a project that's ongoing right now, that we're doing a bunch of drapery track, and in most of the locations, we also have a roller in place as well. I would probably say the most common where I see drapery track is in theaters. So when you have some of these like open concept rooms, and you have you're trying to get a little section of it to be a theater, you'll have a drapery track, kind of that close offs, that kind of close offs that area for you, so that way you can have a more theater-like experience without having everything just echo back into the rec room and bar area. And the other areas is in the master bedroom. So in this specific master bedroom, when we were talking about blackouts earlier, the drapery tracks, or the drapery, will actually be providing the blackout functionality. So the blackouts are going to come from the way outside. They're going to come in and they're going to close off the window completely with a center draw. And then there's a sheer shade behind it, which will allow them to have normal window treatments without having to have the draperies closed in place.
Dax, have you seen this kind of the same uses, or have you seen any other places that clients use a drapery to good effect?
we've seen them used as a shear as well. So they use the rollers, the Blackout, almost the opposite of what Jose was just talking about, because a lot of designers are bringing in draperies, whether they be functional or non-functional, just to add a softness to a room by adding some hung material. So that is also it's also been a big play here recently in a lot of designs.
Yeah. I would just add one, just because I think it's really fun. But Houston did a project where they actually had a drapery that covered the window one way, and this was again in a master bedroom. Um, and it looked like it was a very, very long window. But when you drew the shade back from the other side, it had actually covered their TV. So it just looked like a big window covering when they didn't want to watch TV. But when they did, they just hit a button, the shade moved out of the way, or the drapery moved out of the way, and the TV was behind it. So draperies, I agree, really fun project to use. A lot of really cool uses we can do for them. Um, and then I guess maybe the next most common would be Roman shades. Now I know that we don't actually sell pre-configured Roman shades, but how would someone work with us if they did want to do that kind of more dramatic Roman shade look?
Well, in a lot of cases, we sell the hardware itself, the mechanical hardware of the drapery. So we work with the interior designer in their workroom as to what fabric they want, the type, and then we provide the actual mechanics to them. So they sew the Roman, things of that nature. Then they just attach it to the mechanism, and it acts like any other shade in the house.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point because it's still one of our shades, we can make sure that it is seamlessly integrated into the home. And when the client pushes a button, issues a voice command, whatever it is, they're going to have the exact same experience that they would with any other shade product in the house. Um, and then I guess let's go ahead and move outdoors. Probably the next most common shade we do is actually exterior motorized shades. Um, that is, I think, something that has grown again, just in DFW, a huge amount of our business or a huge amount of growth in that marketplace. And we're all in markets, I think, where people use motorized shades outdoors for a different reason. But what have you seen as the biggest benefits of the ability to do outdoor or exterior motorized shades? Dax, I'll start with you.
It's taking that, extending the living space from inside to out. So if you've got a full like three or patio around the outside of your house, it's covered, that's off like a rec room. Being able to drop motorized bug screens around there, or even um, shaded screens, to allow you to be able to sit out there. If the back of your house faces west, you want to sit out there at night and not get cooked. That's a nice thing to do, to be able to have that shade come down, and it really just enhances your house in terms of being able to take that indoor living and bringing it out, so outdoors.
Jose, I'm sure in your market you're a little bit more worried about keeping cold out than maybe keeping heat out. What's it like to have a patio that's screened in and has a fireplace or some sort of heater in there? Like, what kind of experience can that give a client?
Yeah, so most of our outdoor spaces are have in-ceiling heaters or have wall heaters of some kind because, when it's October, November, I mean it's in the 40s. It's really nice weather. You could still be outside if you got a little bit of heat. And I think providing that the screens outside and be able to bringing those screens down and extending that indoor space outdoor a little bit, I think it's great for people. Obviously, they're using it in the opposite as you would down in DFW, where you're trying to keep you're trying to keep the heat out, but we're trying to bring the heat in from the house out into the outdoor space. And I think most people really enjoy their outdoor spaces and allowing them to have bug screens. Now we flip it over to the summer. In the summer, there's a lot of bugs here. So having those bug screens really work well. The sun doesn't set till 9:30 at night. So if you want to be out there in the evening, how Dax was saying, that west sun is going to be just baking into the side of your house at 8:30, 8:45. So having those screens out there to basically cut out some of that light is also very beneficial in the summer and in the winter to bring in that indoor warmth out into your outdoor area.
Yeah, I had a client in Texas in the winter, obviously, who tested it. He kind of left his patio full open, measured the temperature, and then he put the shades down and turned on his fireplace. And he said about 30 minutes later, his temperature was 25 degrees higher inside his patio than outside. And in most parts of the country, a 25-degree swing eh, is the difference between not really enjoying being outside and being in a very, very comfortable environment. Like you said, in 40 degrees, 25 degrees to get you into the mid 60s. That's very
Yeah.
comfortable. Um, when we do exterior screens, the fabric choices are a lot like interior roller shades. Um, there are probably just a few really big considerations someone should have. Jose, you mentioned bug screens. So just thought back to you, like, what should someone consider when they're determining what type of fabric they would want to use on their exterior screens?
Well, I think one of it is, I mean, if we go back to kind of our roller shades, if you want it for privacy, right, then you have to kind of consider, hey, you're going to get something that's a little bit more tighter, right? It has a little less openness factor to it. Now, something to also consider when you have less openness factor in an outdoor screen is you're going to have less airflow. So just because you're outside on a windy day, those shades are going to be moving. You're not going to get that same airflow and fresh breeze when you have a tighter uh, openness factor. So that's something to consider there. The other part is, do you want to have the best view and allow clarity, and all you want it is for bugs, right? To keep bugs out. You can do bug screens, which are much, much bigger, have a much larger opening than um, than normal shades do from a sun protection standpoint.
Yeah, those are all really good points. So I want to move on. Now we've talked about kind of um, the most common types of shades we use, the most common situations we run into. So doing these in new builds is pretty easy for us. We typically will work with the architect at the planning phase and make sure our shades incorporate into the plans, and we have a lot of control over that situation. But when we're doing a retrofit, we don't have quite as much control. Now, we don't have time today to talk about all of the different considerations with a retrofit, but I think one of the most obvious is if we can't wire a shade in and get power supplied to it, we would have to use a battery operated shade. What are the downsides to doing that, and are they that severe? Dax, I'll start with you.
Some, picking the right battery powered shade is a big one. So most of the battery powered shades we sell are from Lutron, which gives you about a 2 year time limit on your batteries, which is easily almost double what most others give you. And that's big because do you really want to get up and change batteries every once a year, things like that? And it always dies when you want to use them the most. So trying to pick out something that will last a long time, and it just makes it a little bit bigger, just trying to, and then you're just picking out what type of fascia and how you want to look in the situation.
Jose, any other considerations when using battery operated shades? I know there aren't quite as many aesthetic and installation options as you might have, but if somebody has a pre-existing home, they just want to hang a shade in the window, are there really any limitations for them?
I think a lot of it is just what are you willing to see on your window. You can't conceal things as much unless you start creating a valance over it. Like you're going to have a shade. In some cases, you can put the window treatments within the window frame, which is great. Sometimes you have to go over it or on the ceiling or on the wall. And there's just considerations about the actual look of it where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to like that. The other part is if you are having to do battery operated shades, right? How Dax was saying, you get on Lutrons, you get 2 years. Like, how feasible is it to change those batteries? Like, you have to kind of consider that as well. And then when it comes to the market of battery operated shades, there's lots of other manufacturers out there that make a product that's battery operated shades. Some of them are rechargeable. Okay, you got to recharge them every 4, 5, 6 months. Like, is that really worth it? You also have other products that have like little battery packs that kind of sit on top of the unit or something like that. Like, is that really the look that you're looking for? Um, one of the other some of the other products out there are not the quietest things out in the market, right? So how do you want the system to perform for you is also another big one where, yeah, you can save a lot of money going with product Y, but it's not going to give you the same performance as some of the other products that we work with.
Yeah.
One of the other big things also is with the Lutron shades is when they go up, do you want them all to go up together? Because a lot of those other manufacturers, they'll be staggered because they're all the motors aren't talking and rolling at the same speed. So the look and the efficiency of them is a big factor as well.
Yeah, that's one of those things that doesn't seem like that big of a deal. Um, but it is, to me, it's like heated seats in a car. You might say, I don't need that. But then once you have it, you never want to go back. You're like, okay, you know what? I like heated seats. I'm spoiled now. I like it. When you've seen all the shades in a room, I mean, we have single rooms that have 20 plus shades. And when you see them all moving in perfect unison versus that kind of snaggletooth, staggered look, you realize, none of these are cheap. I might as well just get the right ones that operate
Right.
exactly the way I would want them to. And Dax, I like that you said 2 years because I think that's what Lutron promises for their batteries. My parents' shades are 10 foot by 10 foot. I think they have, 8 of them in one room, and they're 5 years old, and we haven't replaced a single battery yet. So
Yeah.
2 years is kind of a minimum, which I think
Yeah.
is a big difference maker with the Lutron.
Yeah.
So Jose, you mentioned how things work. Well, let's kind of skip from how we power them to how we control them. What do you see as kind of the primary ways people are controlling the shades in their home? Um, Both just practically, what do people have, and then what should they consider?
So I think a lot of it is the application, right? So if you have a bedroom shade, you're going to want something bedside, right? Because you're in bed, you want to close it in the evening, you want to open it in the morning. You have something there. That's kind of the tactile portion of it. If you're kind of in a great room or living room, you may have a keypad on the wall that it's kind of tied into the system and it allows it to integrate and communicate, and everyone that's in the home can reach and access it.
So there are obviously a lot of great ways to control shades, and I guess it's important to say that people don't just have to choose one, right?
No, you have time sequences. So every day, if you want the shade to come down 10 minutes before dusk every day, that will be able to change throughout the year. So in the summer, it comes down at 8 o'clock, and the winter, it comes down at like 4. And that will automatically do that for you, without you doing anything. You also have any type of app control to be able to control it from your phone, tablet, keypad on the wall, remote control. There's numerous different ways, and you can stack as many of them on top to do the exact same function.
Yeah, I think some of the really popular ones we see, you might not use a remote to control the shades in your kitchen, but you would absolutely do that in your theater where you could just hit play and the shade would come down if the sun's out. It is, to me, that's one of the exciting parts. And that's the reason, what Jose alluded to right at the beginning of the podcast, that's the reason that an AV company is handling shades, is because choosing the fabric, that is something designers specialize in. That's great, but they typically aren't that interested in the mechanisms that make them go up and down and how all that's controlled. And that really is our specialty, is thinking through and solving those problems. And if we can make that shade integrate into someone's home and into their life in a way where they are going to consistently use it, it it shows its value really quickly. I mean, we've kind of said motorized shades are not the cheapest option, though they're not probably as expensive as most people would expect them to be. But once we can really find those the ways to control it that match how someone lives in their home, it can make it a really, really powerful tool for them. And maybe somebody can speak to this. I know we probably don't sell that many of these, but for somebody listening that isn't going to go do a complete remodel of their home, they just want to add a single shade in. Can somebody just talk about how awesome the Pico remote is? Because I have those in my house personally, and I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan. So
Yeah.
Jose, just explain what a Pico is and talk about how it can be used.
So Lutron has these little remotes. They're called Pico remotes. Here it is with a pedestal. This is by far one of the most versatile little remotes. They come in all kinds of different configurations. This one here specifically for shades, right? It's completely wireless. This could also be mounted on the wall, And you can close your shade, open your shade, go up and down, and then you also have a preset where you can have the shade set to a specific level. And these little remotes, they're battery operated. The battery lasts like 10 years. And they're so versatile because they allow that functionality and ease of use for anybody to just look at the icon and push it. And there's no real big programming involved. The remote does what it does. It's just up, down, open, close, and a preset button.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to just add a single shade to their existing home, they don't know if it's something they really want to make an investment in, they can buy that shade, buy a single Pico remote, connect them to each other, and have this really powerful, smart, intelligent system, especially when they use the what I think is a free Lutron app to control it all. Can build a really smart system. And my favorite use of that Pico remote is you said you can mount it to the wall, but I don't think people probably got the idea that that is the exact same size and shape as a Decora, those paddle wall switches. So you can actually put it in a plate and it looks just like a switch on the wall. Even if there's no space behind it, you can just put a bigger plate on the wall, put it there, and now you've got a dedicated switch on the wall right next to your lights that controls the natural light in the room. I just think that is so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't need any special boxes like you mentioned. You just, the remote and and one simple shade is all you need to get the system up and running.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool feature, especially for, again, somebody who's doing some small work in their existing house, but isn't ready to commit to the full system. They can enjoy it, experience that really high quality system, and then expand it for their next home. So now on to some of the more fun questions. When somebody is thinking about installing shades in their home, what are some of the common mistakes that they make? So kind of putting you on the spot, what common mistakes do you see people make when they're thinking about putting shades in their home? Dax, I'll start with you.
I would say the material that they've chosen, whether it be um, too open or too closed, or they wanted more light control by not doing a blackout. That's the biggest thing we see is the type of material and the application it's being used for is one of the biggest mistake points.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
You can
definitely something we
also,
can help with. Sorry,
yes.
Jose, go ahead.
No, no worries. So I would also say if you, from a design perspective, if you take it all the way back to the beginning, where if you're wanting to do shades, but you don't really think about it and you kind of put it off and put it off and you just think you could just throw the shades up somewhere, well, you may end up with a really ugly box that you're not expecting in your brand new custom home. So sometimes waiting too long to discuss and or to have that discussion about shades can present a problem on the tail end, because you could very easily, you know, build it into the ceiling. You could, you know, maybe trim around it with some crown molding or have some type of design, some design cue that allows the shade to disappear in the room. So that's definitely something that you don't want to wait too long to have that discussion about, hey, I want to do these shades, but I don't know when to do it. And I definitely think anybody that has done shades, the importance of measurements are very important, right? Because these shades are custom built, and when we take measurements, we expect that the window that's there that we measured not to change. So we want to make sure that you get accurate measurements. Nothing's changed, because it will affect the shade. And sometimes you can't make a shade get longer.
Yeah,
Sometimes you can make it shorter, but you can't make it longer. Um, the
we
other
won't
part,
say how we know that.
yes, there's,
We've
we
never
won't
made
say
that
anything.
mistake.
Never. The other part is door hardware. So if you're doing windows and doors, I mean, you know, you forget about that door handle, and or you forget about that window latch that's kind of in place. And the last thing you want is your drapery to be coming down, and then all of a sudden it starts, you know, it can't get by because there's something there. Uh, so things like that are just things that have to be considered as you're designing the room, the space, and what shade to pick, and what's the correct application, and what's the right product, and how to properly
Yeah.
order it as well.
I think one of the points you made that was really important is starting to have those conversations early. We had a client that in their master bedroom, they were kind of what Dax talked about. It was a doctor who did have to work night shifts quite a bit. And so he sleeps during the day. And they had this long linear window above the bed, and they wanted to put a shade in there after the fact. And so this was a new build house. It could have been designed in, but that window was only about 10 inches tall. And they were so disappointed when they found out that just to put a shade in after the house was built was going to take up about 4 inches of that just 10-inch tall window. So about half of it was going to be gone and just replaced with the shade. And that could have so easily been solved by just having that conversation early, having the architect build a pocket in there. They might have had to make the wall slightly thicker to do it, but again, nothing that's going to cause a problem for them in the construction phase. But it was a big problem after the fact, and just really made this what they thought was a beautiful detail of their home kind of hard to live with. The last thing I would mention is choosing shades based just on price. And again, I think that's important. It's easy to do because they're not that cheap, but a huge percentage of that cost is the cost of the fabric. So all of the shades you could choose are going to be fairly expensive. And getting something that isn't as reliable or is noisy or doesn't fully integrate with the rest of the electronics in your home just because it's a little bit cheaper, I think is something that you feel excited that you saved money the first month. But once that pain of having spent that money is gone, you're going to have so many years of living with that product, and you want to have the right one and you want it to be easy to use. Otherwise, you're just not going to use it. Just like I don't really use these because they're not that convenient to use.
I think that's maybe the perfect moment to say that was a great conversation. I'm just sitting back here listening to you guys. You covered a huge amount of stuff. I think that was really useful. And I'd encourage anyone who's thinking about shades to really listen through that conversation, maybe listen to it again and really get a sense of all the places and all the decisions you could make. So really, great feedback. Thanks very much, guys. And thanks for taking part.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel.